of it. So I was really happy to hear when Justice Kavanaugh kind of was like the other day that maybe he wasn't, even though he signed on to it, he wasn't too thrilled with it either. Maybe. I mean, you can only read so much into these guys' heads. But so let me know how your weekend's going. I hope everything's going well. And if anybody is confused about anything in particular, let me know. And I'll know what direction to head. Whew. It was also, by the way, a very long walk in some very hot sun out this morning to get all of that video. So I'm rehydrating. Hey Ted, how you doing? Morning. Or it's afternoon. Oh, it's 3 o'clock. It's not even close to morning. Woo. And yeah, if you guys, you guys are hitting like, so I appreciate it. Thank you. We're getting those numbers up, so that's good. Okay, so California, it's noon there, so you're just barely out of the morning there. But all right, so I am going to run through, just for starters, where we are right now. Oh shoot! Wait, give me 1 second. I accidentally started a stopwatch instead of a timer, instead of a countdown. So there we go. All right. I wanted to catch you guys up on, just do a quick run through on what happened on Friday, because it was a little bit, the Thursday night into Friday, it was a little bit confusing, and I realized, when I sat down and kind of rewatched my own video, that I'd answered a couple of questions, but I'd left a little bit hanging there. Oh, faithful attorney Di follower, that's awesome. Isn't she amazing? So just to catch you up, here's the quick and easy. First, we got a message from the Attorney General, the Pam Bondi, that the DEA chief would be taking over for the DC police chief. That was like memo number 1, and the DC Attorney General responded to that with his own memo that said, no. It was a memo to the DC Chief of Police that said, just so you know, you are still the Chief of Police, and you need to let all of your officers know that they do not follow anyone's instructions but yours. Tell them not to follow anybody else's orders. Which, when I saw 2 different memos coming from 2 different attorneys general telling an entire police force to follow opposite orders, that's confusing. So I was like, uh-oh, how is this going to play out? So first thing in the morning, the DC AG files a complaint specifically against that action, against taking over the DC police force, taking over for the DC police chief. And I was sitting around waiting all day, like edge of my seat. And then at 2 p.m. there was a hearing, and I tried to call in. I couldn't get the stupid link to work. It was probably my fault. But I was able to piece together from what happened, what I heard, kind of what happened in there. And so the judge got up and basically said, all right, I got good news and bad news for everybody. Nobody's going to love this. Nobody's going to hate this. First, we have this Home Rule Act of 1973 that was written by Congress, and it says that DC is allowed to handle a bunch of stuff on their own. They're allowed to get a mayor. They're allowed to, that mayor's allowed to appoint a police chief, and that police chief is in charge of the Metropolitan Police Force. So, federal government, you are not allowed to install your own person as the police chief. That's not allowed. Okay. But the Home Rule Act also said that the president is allowed, and I forget the exact wording, it's very carefully worded, but the president is allowed to essentially tell the mayor, hey, you need to tell the police chief to go do this for me. It's much more carefully worded than that, but that's the general idea. So that's what the judge said. Good news, bad news for everybody. Nobody gets what they want. always the best, right? Robert, I'll get back to you in 1 second. I don't want to lose my train of thought. Sorry. Let's see, I lost it anyway. So that's where we were at the end of that 2 p.m. hearing, apparently. And so the federal attorney general, Pam Bondi, issued a new memo. And the new memo rescinded her first memo. And a bunch of people in D.C. said, yay! And then it issued a new memo. And a bunch of people in D.C. said, boo. Because the new memo said, okay, we hear what the judge says. So instead of putting our guy in as police chief, we are instead going to make him liaison to the mayor to tell the mayor what she is supposed to tell the police chief to do, as we've been told we're allowed to do. So that became the new plan. However, the thing that I noticed is that right around the time that was issued, there was another thing put on the docket. I can't remember if it was right before it or right after it, but I have a feeling that everybody knew what was going on. So, which is just sort of a reminder, I think, because this is always there, sort of a reminder to the federal attorney general, to Pam Bondi, that she is still required to draft an answer to the original complaint in 21 days, which just means it's a reminder that that case is still open. So even though she said, okay, I heard what you said, Judge, so I'm changing my behavior to do whatever you've asked, the judge was like, okay, well, just a reminder, this case is still open and I haven't ruled yet. So, I talked a little bit, I gave you a hint about what I was thinking, but I haven't actually issued a ruling. So that's where we kind of ended things. And I think it became a little bit less of an emergency once the federal attorney general pulled back the initial order and there was no longer these kind of competing orders that kind of weren't possible to both have at the same time. Where one said all police officers have to follow this person's orders and the other said absolutely not, all police officers have to follow this other person's orders. Like, those two needed to get dealt with immediately. Once one of those was rescinded, then I think the judge was like, okay, I've got a little breathing room. I think it kind of pulled things back. So we're going to, I don't think we're done with this. I think we're going to hear more. And I think that's going to come down to, the minutia, though. It's going to come down to little specifics, because I think generally the picture probably is going to look something like that. But that is where we are. And we've kind of survived with that throughout the weekend, I think. I don't know. So that's what's happening at this moment. I'm guessing tomorrow morning we will see some more action. And I'll put that all in the morning report. I will probably, just because it really screwed me up on Friday, I was all ready to go and then I had to stop and rewrite everything because I tried to get this last minute stuff in and I didn't end up getting it out till afternoon. So I might wait and put it in the next days, but we'll see. Okay, I saw Ted's question. I will get back to it in a second because I do have an update. I had an update on Kilmer Rodrigo Garcia for Friday that ended up getting bumped because of this DC National Guard thing. Or because the DC, this thing I just explained. So I'll tell you what I do know. Is DC a federal installation, like a military base or a national park? Think of it. Okay, I mean it's its own thing. DC is its own thing, but I think the best parallel would be Puerto Rico or American Samoa. It's a piece of land that is not a state, so it does not have that kind of protection of federalism the way that states do, but it does have its own kind of shell government. And it's different from an Indian reservation because they actually have a level of sovereignty that DC does not have. DC's sovereignty is far more fragile. We have it, but it's obviously a lot easier to crack, as you can see. So it's just a little bit different. I don't know if that helps at all, but let's see here. Okay, Isabel, how it works with the National Guard, it's just a totally different question with the National Guard. And I to be honest, I have known the answer. I don't have it in the front of my brain. The general idea is that I think that there's a lot of flexibility with bringing in the National Guard in DC within the district. Again, because we don't have that protection of federalism. The states were all kind of signatories to the Constitution. Each state basically said, they were, there was a sort of a give and take. We're going to give something up in exchange. We're going to get something back when they signed the Constitution, when they agreed to the Constitution. It's a mutually beneficial, whatever. It's like it was more like a contract, but the states had to give something up in exchange for what they got back, and that makes it kind of super binding, but also super protective. DC wasn't in on that. We weren't part of that agreement. Technically the later states weren't part of the original agreement, but they did sign on. They kind of went through the process. Okay, what happened with Kilmer Rodrigo Garcia? This one, it sort of, I was trying to write it in an upbeat way, and I had a little trouble with it. But basically, the deal is that he was supposed to be released, and he was being kind of just temporarily held in Marshall's custody, which is sort of like a jail, but it's more just like a spot to hold them for a little bit. Sometimes it's just a room. It kind of depends where you are. And he was about to get released, and then they got word that the federal government was planning to take him out of the country back to CCOT as soon as he got released. And so he requested to stay in Marshall's custody because and the judge ended up agreeing to that because the judge also wasn't sure whether he would be safe being fully released. So for the moment, that's where things seem to stand. I have not seen anything else on the docket that suggests otherwise. I looked through, I tried to find a spot where anything had changed, and it does not seem to have changed since the middle of July. So he, I think, is still in the Marshall's custody, but kind of his own request. Okay. Let's see here. I got behind. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to catch back up. Decision on Newsom v. Trump. Who knows? Who knows? I am guessing there's a lot of research that judge has to do before we're going to get an answer, so it's probably going to be a little while. Oh, I just invited somebody to do something, which I didn't mean to do because my finger slipped. So, whoops. That was the question. And it doesn't make it okay. Yeah, well, a lot of things. Yeah, sorry. Going into law, best advice. Make sure that you want to be a lawyer. Don't go into law because you want to make a bunch of money, because you very well may not. But it's, if you enjoy it, then do it. Can the executive branch override the governor and take states' rights for their city? I don't have it's a very complicated question with a lot of, it's kind of going to depend on the right. It's going to depend on what we're talking about. Very specifically, whether it's, because there's a very long answer to that question. Tell you what, Robert, ask me that again in a few minutes. I got to catch up for a second because I'm way behind and I don't know how far behind. Okay, hold on. I just lost everything. Okay. Homeless people who were evicted. I mean, basically, they're probably in other parts of the city, or it's not that big of a city. So I don't know if you guys realize. So DC is a diamond, except that half of it is gone. Because half of it was in Virginia, half of it was in Maryland, and the Virginia half went back to Virginia. So it's really small. And the old one, the original diamond, was 10 miles by 10 miles. So it's not even 10 miles by 10 miles. Walking from one end to the other, it's not that far. So my guess is that people who left just went into Maryland or Virginia. And that's what happened. So I'm not sure. Monroe Doctrine. I don't have a good answer to that one. That would take me some pretty deep research on that one, Robert. No, I think I kind of answered that one. Yeah, legal and well, so someone asked about legal, and what is legal is not always what is ethical. And of course, it comes down to, because in my head I'm thinking ethical versus legal ethics, which are two very different animals, right? They're barely even friends. Yeah, it's a different question. It's funny. I had to both take and lead courses on ethics as an assistant attorney general, and the courses I took I found very interesting because they were aimed at regular employees, and they were more just about reasons you shouldn't steal things from work, that sort of thing. And I was like, well, this isn't really ethics. This is just kind of, don't do bad things, but that's not really ethics. So, I guess ethics kind of depends on who you are, what you're thinking. Legality of other states sending National Guard to D.C. I think that is probably not as problematic as you might think. I was in the middle of a really big, deep dive on understanding kind of the relationship between the National Guard and the National Guards and all of this, and I kind of had to stop because I was getting so far behind on everything else. And I'm hoping that as I get more caught up, as I get faster at doing the morning report, what I'm going to end up doing is giving myself a few hours in the day to start working on these other projects that kind of got buried. And that is like the number one project. It's sitting over here in a binder, just a massive binder of case law and articles, because digging back into kind of the late 1700s and the conversations that were going on about militias, which are what the National Guards are. They are state militias, and they were very much a part of the conversation with opening up the starting up the Constitution and all. There's a lot of conversations about whether states would keep their militia, or who would have control of them, all of this kind of stuff, and whether we would have a national military or not. And so all of those conversations, a lot of them are documented in some form or another, and going through them is really fascinating. So are legal documents signed by auto pen binding? So there are different rules in different places. As a general rule, I can usually just put /s/ and that is a binding signature. I can type that in almost every place, but there are certain places that explicitly say you can't do that, but it's very rare. I would be surprised to find that auto pen signatures are not legally binding. Where do I get my morning report materials from so fast? I read until my eyes bleed. I start basically as soon as I finish and publish the morning report, I start working on the next day's morning report. I start seeing, what's happened in the last 2 hours since I've been working on this. Has anything big happened? And as soon as something does happen, I start reading the case, or reading the filings on it, and start writing and just one, so it sort of depends. Sometimes they're easier. Sometimes it's really evident. I get something and I'm like, oh, well, this is pretty quick and easy, and it's done. And sometimes I end up falling down a rabbit hole and I lose a few hours, and I have to read all of these documents out of the docket to understand what's going on. But it's just me reading. That's how I get all the information. So the Apocalypse Librarian said the only place that he or she knows that requires a wet signature is Union County, Pennsylvania. And I'm trying to think, there were certain parts of my old job where, not every part, but there were certain places where I had to put a wet signature. And I can't remember what they were, but it was a thing. And so that one place I was never allowed to use, a typed /s/. It always had to be an actual pen signature, but it was written in the law that it had to be that in that one specific place. So it's kind of rare. Usually the idea is, and this is all rooted in contract, which is rooted in this idea of a meeting of the minds. So the signature is more you have already agreed to something. The signature is more of a memorialization of that agreement. But your minds have already met. You've had a meeting of the minds. You've agreed on what you're going to do. And then you sign at the end just to clarify that you've agreed on it. But it's the meeting of the minds that is the most important in most jurisdictions. So that's the actual form of the signature is often less important. Thank you very much, Wes Londo. I appreciate that you appreciate what I do. Thank you. Sweating in here. What's going on? So, so I did clarify this morning. I think we're going to hear more from the DC. I should just double check, make sure nothing else got filed. I realized about halfway through saying it that I wasn't totally sure. I've opened it so many times that I actually know what the case number is off the top of my head, which is DC withdrew the temporary restraining order, but they've left the case in place. So that I will find out what that means a little more explicitly, which doesn't surprise me because, like I said, it became a little bit less of a huge thing once that happened. Once they kind of changed the memo. Why don't we use a thumbprint instead of a signature? Well, we have used something like that in the past. And there have been periods of time where we used wax and a signet ring. And I've seen before signed documents where you have 6 pieces of wax across the base with 6 signet rings to let you know that each of those 6 people have signed. And that's just another way of doing it. And it's just in the modern era, as attorneys in particular, we have a tendency to file a lot of stuff online in jurisdictions that will allow it. And so you may never get to print it out, sign it, scan it, and then submit it online would be a little ridiculous. So instead, you just leave the digital copy, put /s/ and your name, meaning signature, and then submit that. And that's often just fine. Aloha Friday with the Faka. Thank you very much. And yeah, thumbprints, and verification is signatures are tough to verify too. It's, but it's really more about, is it normal that the Supreme Court is being asked to review the case that would overturn? Yeah, it's very normal that they're asked to overturn cases all the time. It's the question of whether they do it or not. Yeah, a lot of countries use, well, a lot of countries use thumbprints for voting, but what's interesting is that most of the reason that they do that is because they leave the ink on your finger, and it inks your finger and leaves your finger blue, your thumb blue for a day or so, and so if you come back through and try to vote again, they'll check your thumb, and your thumb's still blue, and so they're like, no. So that's a method of making sure that you don't vote twice. I guess you could cut your thumb off if you really, really wanted to. So I'm not reading that. Can you? I think what you're talking about, the AI written. So I think I'm having a little trouble reading that, but I think that the question there is to talk about the lawyer who wrote the AI document. And it's tempting, right? I mean, we have to write so much stuff. It would be very tempting to just say, write this for me. But it's not a good idea. And that's all I got. I mean... You know, and I've said this on here before that I did. Oh, thank you very much. I did try once because I had to write something really long and I couldn't figure out like a structure for it, and so I figured, you know, I'll just see if it'll give me like some help. And so I printed this thing. I was like, can you write me up a thing with this, whatever? And it printed something out for me, and I looked at it and I was like, okay, well, this is telling me some court cases I've never heard of before. Let me see what. You know, maybe it's found some whatever. And I went and read those court cases. And those court cases were wrong. And that was when I learned not to trust AI. Either they weren't about the case at all, or they were not cases in the first place. So, fortunately, I'm not the kind of person who's just going to take something and turn it in. But a lot of people are. And that's what happens. So... shortcuts are fun, but if it were easy, everybody would do it. Nose prints. We could all use nose prints. I like that. Let's see. Sorry, I have my phone sitting on something to get it right at the right height, and it's... oh, yeah, if you guys wouldn't mind sharing and tapping... I would appreciate it. Get some thingies on, whatever's. Okay, so let me see here real fast. I just want to look. Yesterday was the 16th, and if you'll just give me 1 second. Okay, so oh, thank you very much. I just gave a read to the notice of withdrawal of motion. So the DC AG did withdraw their motion for a temporary restraining order, and I wasn't totally sure why, but I had kind of a guess. I was actually wrong. I thought it was because they've sort of complied and taken some of the stress out of it so they could actually apply for a preliminary injunction instead of a TRO. No, what they've actually said is that they have withdrawn the TRO because it concerns the AG's original order, which has now been rescinded. So that TRO is now irrelevant. There's going to need to be something new filed. And it says that the plaintiff is currently evaluating the new order to decide what to do next. So we will find out tomorrow morning probably what's happening in that case, and we'll just have to see. I did, because if anybody saw, I did go out this morning. I should have gone out last night just to try to get something to show you guys. But you can see, enough people are posting that. I guess I don't probably need to. But I wanted to go out and sort of see the aftermath. Oh, thank you. Go out and take a look at what things looked like. And I walked over to 14th Street, which is where everything seems to be happening. And walked over, took a look, and it's just quiet. It's just very, very quiet. It was almost eerie how quiet it was. And it was a little early, but it wasn't that early. And it's just dead. And I think that it's I don't know. I thought it's a little bit weird that they keep hitting 14th Street because it's not the spot that I would have expected them to be hitting. But it is a really, really good spot if you want to be publicized. Lots of really big apartment buildings right there, luxury apartment buildings, people up there. That is where they're doing this, is in front of a bunch of luxury apartment buildings. It's not next to the university. It is about 10 or 15 years ago, there was this huge spike in people that wanted to live in the city. And so they started building all of these high-rise apartments on 14th Street. And 14th Street went from being kind of not quiet, but whatever, into like it became the most expensive real estate in the city for a little while. I don't know if it probably still is not anymore, but it was for a few years. It was the most expensive real estate per square foot in the city. And it's all of these huge for DC because we have height restrictions. So nothing's allowed to be more than however many stories tall. But it's relatively tall, very nice, fancy apartment buildings that are very expensive. And so that all of these big operations that have happened in the last few days on the weekends have all been right in front of these buildings. And it's just a weird spot. And the only thing that occurred to me as I was walking around there is, if I wanted to get this on camera, this is where I'd do it. Because all of these guys have TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and they've all got the perfect view. So that's the only thing I can think of, because there's no other reason to do it right there. It just doesn't make any sense to me otherwise. But that's not a legal opinion. It just doesn't make any sense otherwise. And I have not seen a soul near me. I haven't seen, in my neighborhood, I have not seen a federal officer. I haven't seen a military. I'm sure they'll be here at some point. Does the National Guard presence no, the National Guard presence makes me feel way less safe. Significantly less safe. I felt way safer before they were here. Yeah, I have not seen anybody in my neighborhood. So I don't know why they're only kind of in a few spots, and they all seem to be. Anyway, so that was what I gathered this morning, and that's what I got. And again, it might change. They might, who knows? Tomorrow they may be hanging all around my house, but they haven't been here so far. I am very intimidating, for the record, so who knows? They could be here any minute. Do I see any unalivings on my Ring doorbell? No, I do not. I have not seen that, no. So the legal occupation, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I have short answers, and I haven't done enough research to give you a really full and answer that I'm thrilled with on that. So I don't want to say for sure. I know that there's a 48-hour thing, and then there's a 30-day thing, but then Congress is allowed to give permission for more, I think, and I don't see any chance of them not doing that. So do I think more people are not protesting out of fear? Probably not. There's been, I think, a fair amount of protesting going on. So I don't know. Again, I haven't been out there at night. It's not that far, but I'm old. Are they allowed to impose a curfew? I'm not sure. I mean, so I think, if I understand correctly, the curfew's only for people over a certain or under a certain age. So I don't know. I don't know. Is the request to extend the National Guard for the subject to the filibuster? I don't know. I think they might have to, if the Senate would have to approve it, then yeah, it would be, because it's not a budget. Yeah, I think. So I think. Noah, can you? Oh no. So the answer to your question, no, was you were asking, you're thinking about going to law school and wanted some advice. Just make sure that you want to be a lawyer. Don't go to law school because you want to make a ton of money. It may not happen. A lot of lawyers either make enough to get by, or a lot of money, or not. Sorry, or less than that. But not as many make a ton of money as they did 30 years ago. So make sure this is something you really want to do. If it's something you really want to do, go for it. But I think that's a very important thing to make sure that you're sure of. So farmer, I am. So my understanding is that, most things are subject to the filibuster except for budget issues as a general rule. And this does not seem like it would be a budget issue. So that would be the guess, is that it would be subject to the filibuster. Now the police are back under DC control. So the police are under DC control in that the DEA head is has not taken over as head of as chief of the DC police. However, currently my understanding is that the DEA chief is acting as liaison to the mayor and essentially instructing her on what the police force has to do to comply with the precedent. I don't know if they're pushing back on that or not. Better represent your current work in telecom. No. Absolutely. Make sure go to a school with a good IT or intellectual property program. You're very welcome, farmer. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that's correct. It's pretty close. Martial law has not been declared. No. Martial law is something very, very specific and very difficult to make happen. The courts would, and also, it's a slightly, ever so slightly difficult term to pin down. So be a little bit careful with it, in that a few people, it means a slightly different thing to slightly different people. So be a little careful with it. But as a general rule, the idea of what I would call the closest thing to martial law is when the court system is replaced by the military court system. And that is only allowed to happen within the boundaries of the United States when the federal courts are no longer able to operate. And the only time I believe... Okay, I won't say only, but an example of a time that I know... Okay, I can think of 2 times that I think that this has happened off the top of my head. So, one is they needed to send somebody through court in, I want to say Virginia, or somewhere in the Confederate South, after the Confederacy had been declared. So there are no longer American federal courts down there. They need to send somebody through a court system, and there are no federal courts down there anymore. So because of that, they were able to send them through a military court because there are no federal courts in place. That was one example. Another example, but I don't think this totally stood. I think it was a little rocky. I don't think the conviction actually stood eventually, is around the era of Pearl Harbor in Honolulu, when the court system was shut down because of the emergency going on, and it was a crime, like a regular crime. They needed to send this guy to court, and there were no courts open. And so they sent him to a military court because it was the only one there. And I think his conviction was eventually overturned. But I think generally that's still a pretty good example of what I think of as martial law. So just be a little careful with that phrase. It's touchy. If the president ignores the Supreme Court, who wins? Not us. That's the answer. We lose. I don't know between the two of them who wins, but I can tell you that we all lose. new constitutional amendment I would like to see has something to do with the treatment of corporations, but I would have to really work to figure out exactly what the edges are on that. On Guam, after World War II, it may have happened. That sounds very, very likely. That seems very likely. Andrew Jackson wins. Yeah, that's yeah. But I think that that would not be a good time for anybody. All right, what? So, what Grown Old says here is what appears is that those currently in charge keep pushing the envelope of legal actions, and I think that is a very astute observation. Here's the thing: a lot of there are other systems of government that are based a lot more on force, shows of force. You are forced to do something. And at the end, at the backstop of their system is some sort of force. And our system is not built that way. At the backstop of our system is an agreement that we have all agreed to voluntarily. And the problem with that is when you start pushing back too far, you're not going to find anything to stop you. We just have all sort of agreed not to push back too far. And that agreement is held for a really long time. But if you keep pushing, it can be problematic. So, and that is, so it's not that people are necessarily operating outside of the law when they're pushing, because people do push. People push all the time. But it's a question of how far you're willing to push. So, can we kick a state out of the union? I'd have to look. I think there is probably a process. I believe there is a process. I might be getting my Articles of Confederation and my Constitution confused, or maybe even just some draft stuff that didn't make it into either. I can't remember. I have to look. If an appellate court upholds a lower ruling, can it be appealed again to a higher court? Yes. Yeah. The other side just keeps appealing. Will everything end up before SCOTUS? Maybe. And, one of the problems is that the Supreme Court is, to some extent, recognizing that backstop as voluntary in a lot of cases. And they don't, they are designed in the same system. They are also supposed to not push it too far. And they, of any of the branches, are the slowest to act. And that's the way they're supposed to be. So, they have always been. They've always been the slowest to act. So, you can't be disappointed in them for acting the way that they always act. That's not really an answer, but it's the best I got from them. Yeah. And by the way, yeah. If you can tap, I would appreciate it. And all the stuff. I need to keep reminding myself to occasionally make my own commercials in these things. Brunson case. You got to remind, that name is not, am I going to paint my VW like Herbie? I actually had a kit to do that, and I ended up not doing it. I was really excited about it, and then I decided not to. I don't know why. I just changed my mind. So who knows? Maybe I'll change my mind back. But I was close. I was very close. And then I was like, So, who knows? Hold on a second. Let me see here. Okay. I'm going to have to reread Brunson. I don't know that one off the top of my head. I think, oh, yeah. So, yeah, I'd have to guess on that one. I'll try to remind myself to, and of course it's, long enough that it would take me a little while. Oh, yeah. All right, there we go. Yeah, that would take me a little while. So, All right, I think something spilled. I'm not sure what, but I got to go check on this, guys. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut out a little bit early. I'm going to come back on possibly a little bit later, and I will try to do that. But if not, I will be back for the morning report in the morning. I'm sorry, I can something spilled because I can smell it. So let me go deal with that, and I'll talk to you all later. Thank you very much.